Hi, everybody. I can't see anybody. It's so bright here. I will be going over in time into the break. I'm from New York, which means you can interrupt me at any time. We consider it normal to interrupt in New York. And you can go to the lavatory, you can go to the bathroom, you can even raise your hand. I prefer interaction. I cannot see anybody because of how bright the lights are. And I have one other announcement. The talk that I was going to give has actually changed somewhat. So the title was Clinical Approach to Food Addiction, and we're actually going to be talking about something else. We'll mention food addiction, but we'll be talking about informed consent, and we'll be talking about hunger. So I apologize for that. I will post a full talk on food addiction that you can access if you're interested in that topic, and I will make it available to you. Personal disclosures, let's see, dietary disclosures I think is really important. I failed Weight Watchers, low fat, and found personal success with low carb and intermittent fasting. I own a medical company, an app, a podcast that I'm a co-host, and my wife sells cookies, really, really tasty cookies. So, about me, if you don't know who I am, some of you may not know who I am. I am very vocal about my own food addiction. I suffered from anorexia as a child. I've talked about my prediabetes, sleep apnea, hypertension that were all resolved. I'm double board certified, internal medicine, obesity medicine. You may not know, I'm a certified personal trainer. I'm a certified health coach. And we have a nationwide practice. I've published 7 publications on metabolic health. We have ongoing research with Stanford and Yale right now. I'm on the board of directors of SMHP, app developer, podcast host, father of 3 kids, slayer of dragons, and a social media antagonist, as somebody mentioned. Lane, are you here? Oh, he didn't come to my talk. Is he here, Lane? Oh, he's not here. So he's my Twitter buddy. So our clinical team, it's not just me. You may have met Dr. Laura Buchanan outside. She's, brilliant. Program director is Amy Igus. She's lost 220 pounds, kept it off. Brian Wiley, I think he's probably the only OG here. He's lost 100 pounds and kept it off for, over 15 years. He's just an immense wealth of practice and knowledge. So this is our clinical team. It's not just Dr. Tro. So what I want to cover today, I want you to understand what we do in our clinic versus conventional medicine. And echoing what Dr. Palmer said, this is not to say we don't embrace medications, we don't use medications, but we do things a little bit different. And I want you to understand what it is we do and how special it is and how you can recreate this in your clinics. I want to review the effects of calorie information on eating habits, and I want to highlight how to provide informed consent to your patients before you put them on a diet. Do you talk to them about what are the side effects of the diet you're going to put them on? Any diet, a calorie diet, a satiety per calorie diet, whatever sort of diet you want, okay? Are you going to tell them informed consent, as in what are the negative consequences? The psychosocial consequences, and other consequences. And we're going to be talking about the neurobiochemistry of hunger as it relates to glycemic variability. So these are the things we're going to cover, and this is what I want you to take away. My goal for you from this presentation is to know that your clinic can become amazing. Amazing. And you shouldn't accept the status quo. You shouldn't accept what you've been told in medical school, in nursing school. You shouldn't accept that. If you're a trainer, if you're a PA or an NP, don't accept what they want from you. You have to rise above that. And you can achieve greater results than some of our best medications, and we'll talk about that. And I'm going to say this because this may be preaching to the echo chamber. You need to forget about calories. You need to forget about points. You need to forget about scores. It needs to go. And that's going to be my case today. And you need to rebuild medicine from the ground up. I'm going to echo Chris Palmer again. We need a grassroots movement. So this is the ignored pandemic, right? How exactly did we get here? where we're having these metabolic conferences throughout the United States with the SMHP, with Doug and others. This is the obesity epidemic over the last decade or 2 decades. It's spreading like a virus. Are we thinking about this critically? Are we thinking about what is it that's going on here? And if you're looking at where we got right now, this is from 2020, this is from the CDC, there's more than 16 states with obesity rates above 35%. And that's just amazing to me. This is where we've gotten. And so what do our best and our brightest think? We go to the OMA, us doctors with the obesity medicine certification. We go to our conferences with the AFP. We go to our conferences, with the ACP. And we want to know what they're thinking. And this is a highlight presented from the Obesity Society just 5 or 6 years ago, talking about how complicated obesity is. Does this look understandable to you guys? Can you explain this to a 6-year-old? No. Right? So they're confused. They don't know whether eggs are good or eggs are bad. They don't know. They've been talking about calories for over 50 years, macros, etc. So I want to explain the convention and what they say versus our tiny little practice, the social media punk, the guy that Jeff has to be on his seat about of what's he going to say, is he going to embarrass me? Okay? So this is what the convention told me 7 years ago, that keto and IF will cause disordered eating. So in my practice, I just hadn't seen that. I had seen so many people with binge eating resolve and food addiction resolve. So I published my case series. My patients aren't like yours. My patients aren't like yours. And here's that case series. Dr. Eric Westman, who's here, helped me with that. And I have to thank Dr. Eric Westman for being such a great mentor over these years, trusting me. He didn't have to trust me. He didn't have to help me. So it's a complicated graph here, but all you have to know is basically binge eating symptoms improve with a low-carb diet and with intermittent fasting introduced. They have reduction in food addiction. And as the speaker just before mentioned, it could be complicated, and there's some element of selection bias here. There's only a couple of patients. But my patients were not what the convention said. And there's been further work. My partner, Dr. Laura Buchanan, has done work in group meetings where she empowered patients with CGMs and a low-carb diet at Wake, and she measured their food addiction symptoms before and after systematically, basically resolving it completely. So what's going on here? Why does the convention say it causes eating disorders? Why have they focused on calories? Why are they counting macros and points? Why is Weight Watchers a $200 million company? They also say don't use keto in severe hypertriglyceridemia. Who's heard the NLA's guidelines? Has anybody heard the NLA's guidelines? This was 5 years back. They said don't use keto in high triglycerides. These are our best and our brightest. Right? And I'm like, wait a second. I've had patients with 1,000 come down to under 100. Just a couple. Well, Eric Westman's posted a paper several years ago showing that a low-carb diet systematically reduces triglycerides more than a low-fat one. So why are my patients different? Why are our patients different? What's going on here? Should we trust the convention? This is the National Lipid Association versus tiny metabolic practice, social media antagonists, and slayer of dragons. Who should you trust? Is it selection bias? I don't know. And they say diabetes improves with weight loss and calorie restriction, not carbohydrate restriction. Has anybody heard that one? Yep. It's a lie. And some reason we just all accept it. So I published another case series. Here's 3 patients from my clinic, just when one student was there. A1Cs of 12 going to 6 off of insulin. They didn't lose much weight. This group lost about 8 pounds on average. And this was a big deal when I went to go get it published. They're like, you can't say that it's not without weight loss. They lost 8 pounds. I'm like, yeah, they lost 1 point of A1C per pound. That's a freaking miracle. And since then, we have more data now. This is a meta-analysis showing that there's a linear association between A1C and carbohydrate intake, which we all could have known. In fact, all of your patients knew that on their N=1 experiment with the CGM. So the convention is just wrong. It's just wrong. Here's the convention again. Keto dieters raise LDL because of saturated fat. Who's heard that? Right? Well, in my clinic, we've seen some of the largest LDL drops documented in the medical literature. And we published it. A 480 drop in LDL. 223 drop in LDL, and they didn't change their saturated fat intake. They periodized carbs. Thank you, Dave Feldman, who's also here, and David Ludwig for making this happen, and Nick Norwitz and Adrian Soda, so many people to thank, right? So the convention said it's saturated fat. We didn't remove saturated fat. We just gave a tiny amount of carbs, tiny, and their LDL came down. 480-point decrease, and I'm sure the cardiologists in the room will know about the latest and greatest drugs. This is a drug called Repatha. Has anybody heard of Repatha? The front row may know of it. But Repatha, which is a $10,000 an injection drug, lowers LDL by 60 points. It's a $1 billion valuation. Nobody's given me a $1 billion valuation yet, as far as I'm aware. So we have a documented nutritional therapy in the medical literature, most seen ever, better than the best drug. Should we trust the convention? The convention says that a Mediterranean diet is better than a keto diet. Have you heard that? A Mediterranean diet is a keto diet? This is Dr. Tro and Dr. Eric Westman working together to write a letter to the editor. What they did in this publication, this is Gardner, who Dr. Andreas talked about in his Diet Fits study. Dr. Gardner, what he did was very interesting. In Diet Fits, he equalized the arms by telling everybody to drop sugar and flour, the highest glycemic carbohydrates. And what he did in this study was very manipulative. He said, we're going to compare keto, we're going to compare Mediterranean, and what we're going to do is, if you're in the keto arm, stop all your diabetes medications. And if you're in the Mediterranean arm, stop 50%. And then when he went to go publish his findings, he said, see, there's no difference between keto and Mediterranean. The A1Cs are equal. We had a good talk earlier about selection bias. We don't hear that against the convention. We hear it against low carb. We're biased, we're focused, we're not considering other theories. I'm not sure the convention is doing that either. Here's another one, convention. Use GLP-1 drugs, use hormonal drugs, right? Because it's a miracle and obesity is genetic. Has anybody heard that one? Right? Here's our weight loss results, de-prescribing $4,000 per patient annualized. Right here. These are an employer came to us and said, we want you to bring metabolic health to our company. I didn't pick them. They picked me. And we have over 100 employees now in our program. And what have the results been? 34 pounds weight loss in about 6 months. Biggest LDL reduction in the clinic. 6-point A1C drop, no weight loss. Biggest LDL drop, in the medical literature. And now we have 34 pounds per patient in 6 months. We calculated the cardiac risk reduction, it was 44%. Does anybody know what this line is? That's the STEP trial for semaglutide, also known as Ozempic. We beat Ozempic. More powerful than the most potent LDL drug. More powerful than the most potent weight loss medication. So should you trust the convention? My contention is no. We need to burn it down. Start again. They got it wrong. This is the weight loss data from semaglutide. This is from the New England Journal of Medicine. Jeff, I got all the citations here. The last minute I got it in. So should you trust the proponents of the energy-based model? Should you trust these people? Should we focus on calories? Should we trust the convention? Well, this is what they have. Here's Harvard's food pyramid. Here's the MyPlate. Who is this going to help? And have the Americans followed these guidelines? Predominantly, yes, they've tried. I saw Americans do, they want to help, they want to do the right thing in general. I believe that. I believe that. Nobody wants to be obese. I haven't met one person who wanted to be obese. Not one in over 2,000 patients in our clinic. So as a public health policy, has any of this succeeded? As a medical group, have we succeeded at all? Well, 74% of adults are overweight or obese. I mean, just think about that for a second. 74%. 40% of children and adolescents are overweight or obese. Children. Are the children not following the guidelines hard enough? Can we use that as an excuse? Can we blame the victims? Have we succeeded at all? No. And what do most doctors and dietitians say? They should say, maybe we need to focus on calories. Get your calories down. Even low-carb people are sticking to these calories. We have to create that caloric deficit. I just want a quick hands. Do you believe that you need to create a caloric deficit in your patients? Just raise your hands. Wow, no hands. We got a couple of hands. Okay. So not many hands. Okay, so these are the most common advice we give people. And while it may be true that they need to create a caloric deficit, I think it's very complicated. What will patients do with that? What will they actually do with that information? It's like a flat tire and saying, you need to pump more air than you let out. It just doesn't help. We should ditch it. So this is the most common advice. Use MyFitnessPal. Track your caloric intake. Who's seen this advice? Who's been given this advice? Just raise your hand if one of these things has been told to you. So you were given a dietary prescription. Did anybody here get informed consent? Is anybody told what are the side effects? How well will it work? That's what a proper nutrition program should do. It should give informed consent. So should you trust the EBM model? Well, I'm going to tell you you shouldn't, thanks to Gary Ruskin at US Right to Know. He basically found that Coca-Cola, Wheaties, and Gatorade were bribing Eat Right, AFP, ACSM, and more. That's the second time I said AFP. Sorry. Could this money and this influence have resulted in a myopic focus on calories and EBM to the detriment of other things? What was ignored if we've been focusing on the energy-based model? So what I want from you now is basically forget about calories. I'm going to make my case. Forget about scores. Forget about it all. Forget about points. So let's explore the evidence. As far back as 1982, we knew people cannot accurately track calories. I went back to literature before the time of the low-carb bias, right, and the low-carb cherry picking. Right, I went back. Brownell's actually got so many good papers. I highly suggest you read some of her work. She basically showed that most people can't accurately track or log. It could be because people with obesity who are overweight or who have a tendency to be overweight or obese have a lot of subconscious eating. That could be. It could be that we just underestimate. That could be. But whatever the case is, if you track or log food, it didn't result in any weight loss. And he couldn't do it really accurately. 1982. A meta-analysis from Harnick and French and Elblel and Kisco also showed the same thing. Basically, if you put calories on labels, it doesn't change human behavior. It doesn't do anything. If you tell people at the point of purchase how many calories something is, it didn't do anything. So why are we still doing it? Brownell actually did a great study. She went to fast food restaurants. She put pamphlets. Okay, she put computers and posters about calorie information and measured what did it do. Guess what it did? Nothing. And this is, you're not going to believe this. They've done interventional studies. Okay, at point of purchase, they've told people a combination of things, how much things cost and how many calories are in them. In fact, in some men, if you told them how many calories there were, they actually ate more. They actually ate more. This is like 600 young kids. Here's another one where it contained different types of eaters, restrained eaters, non-restrained eaters, men, women. Basically, if there was a label on it, it actually led some people to eat more, particularly those eaters who generally, weren't health conscious. They ate more. Men ate more again. So they're inaccurate. We can't track them. Even dietitians can't track them. Dietitians and doctors are off by about 10 to 20%. Again, maybe due to subconscious eating, maybe due to the fact that we underestimate portions. It's not clear. People with obesity may error up to 50%. What makes it even worse is when you compare it head to head with even a bad diet, the low-fat diet, right? Even if you compare calorie counting, right, like a fixed energy intake diet versus low fat, which we know performs worse than low carb, which was showed earlier, it didn't do as well, right? So should we double down on calories and macros? This is the amount of people using MyFitnessPal. 200 million people using MyFitnessPal, and our obesity epidemic it's basically still here. So people don't like to count things. They don't like to count things long term. Okay? And in fact, when you poll them on, do you like these apps that make you count? They say, no, it saps my energy. I don't like doing it. It takes up too much time. It just doesn't make me feel good. The continual self-monitoring sapped rather than strengthened my motivation. So should we focus on calories? Here's an example in New York City area. This is where I'm from. They had a law in about 2008, 2010, where they had to show the calorie information on the meals, on the menus. What did it do? Nothing. They compared the fast food intake, restaurant intake from Newark to New York and found that it did nothing. There was no impact. So this is another study, actually. I had to get this translated to go and read through it. It's from a Danish study where they literally looked at basically two different diets. One that was just low in calories and required calorie counting, and I think the other one was low fat. Again, it did not outperform. So what does this mean? It means that counting calories, points, right? Look at Weight Watchers and their success rate. People don't like to do it. We're not accurate about it, okay? And the label information doesn't help people. Having an app to check doesn't help people lose weight. And despite near universal access to this information, it hasn't helped anybody. And as an intervention in head-to-head studies, the few that are there, it's never done better. So should anybody here care about calories? Have you given your patients informed consent that my belief that you should track your calories and count your calories, and my belief in the energy-based model, that it's likely and effective in the interventional data, that it performs worse than even low-fat diets, that people are discouraged by it, and by focusing on calories, you're not focusing on other things like your relationship to food, like the previous speaker talked about. You're not developing other tools. And it's preferentially less accurate in people with more severe disease, meaning the people that need you the most need this message the least. And independent of calories, very low carbohydrate interventions, this was Brett Scher who mentioned it, remit diabetes, reduce seizures, reduce migraines, improve hypertriglyceridemia, thank you Eric Westman, and reduce metabolic syndrome. Thank you Jeff Follick. Calorie for calorie. Have you given your patients informed consent when you start a low-carb diet? What are the psychosocial side effects of dieting? What are they? You want them to lose weight. They're there for you. They're probably there to see you to lose weight. Get healthy. Are you telling them going on a diet will make you more hungry? Are you telling them that it'll cause cravings? That you'll feel deprived? When you're out at business meetings, holidays, parties, on dates, socializing with friends, you're going to struggle. Are you telling them that when you're stressed and you're emotional and you're depressed and you're happy celebrating, when you're so fatigued from making decisions about your food, you're still going to have to manage your diet? These are the 5 things people say cause them to fail diets: hunger, cravings, feelings of deprivation, social situations, including vacations and holidays, and emotions. I'm a stress eater. I'm a chocoholic. I feel depressed. I had childhood trauma. Are you giving them informed consent? Are you telling them my intervention is going to cause this in you, and in fact, it's going to make it harder? So these are your musts if you want to be an amazing doctor. You have to manage your patient's hunger. Maybe Diet Doctor got that covered. Maybe with the satiety per calorie. Maybe. What about their cravings? What about their feelings of deprivation? What about those social situations? What are they going to do? What about their emotions and their mental health and how it impacts what they eat? If you don't manage this, what are you doing? You know that your calorie information, carb information, whatever information you want for your patient, what is it going to do? It's going to cause these. Are you giving them informed consent? Are you telling them, I'm setting you up to fail? Or are you stepping up and helping them with each one of these? So you should teach your patients about hunger. There's a lot of types of hunger. There's uncontrollable hunger, like food is in front of you. That's the cephalic phase response. The brain reward paradigm, which is that carb and fat, that hedonic reward paradigm that Andreas had sort of mentioned. Social cues, emotional cues. And there's a whole bunch of modifiable factors. Glycemia being probably the most important. Eating nutrient-dense food is another one, being in ketosis. Today we're going to talk about hunger induced by glycemic variability. Diet doctors thinking about satiety. I've devoted my career to understanding human hunger. We don't eat to be full. Most people don't eat to be full. They're eating because they're hungry. It's a distinction, and I'm going to walk you through it. So how long have we known that hunger has to do with blood sugar fluctuations? You'd be surprised. This isn't me cherry picking. This is the New England Journal of Medicine, 1953, Gene Mayer. When he asked the question, what is hunger? Is it in the brain? Is it in the gut? Where does hunger come from? Where does it come from? And they didn't know. They thought maybe there was organs or whatever. And he showed that blood sugar fluctuations make people hungry. 1953. Why has this never been explored? Why has this never been explored? Who's been ignoring this? So this is what he wrote. The glucostatic mechanism suggested here seems to provide a basis for precise regulation for the desire for food or satiety. Here's another study. Oh, geez, when was this one? 1996. Okay? This is another study looking at blood sugar fluctuations. And those nadirs, right, in controlled conditions, insulin's effect on glycemia is what drove human hunger. Hunger was the greatest when the blood sugar was the lowest. Also interesting, 1996 was about the time that Gary Ruskin found out that Coca-Cola was paying the AFP and the ACSM. So a signal for hunger in humans is associated with transient declines in blood glucose, 1996. Who is this? Oh, this is Campbell's work. Okay, Campfield, yeah. So this is actually an interesting one. We've heard a lot about controlling for calories. So this is a calorie for calorie comparison. Taste-matched shakes, calorie-matched shakes given to people. And all we're measuring is what happens to their future hunger. What happens to them? When do they initiate another meal? And you can see there's one group of people here that initiate another meal in 60 minutes. That's the carbohydrate group. And there's another group that initiates a meal 2 hours, sometimes 3 hours later. That was the calorie and taste-matched fat group. So the same amount of calories, one leads to more satiety. No, not satiety, satiation. Right? On future eating. Not at the meal, at future eating. Here's another study from 1999. Rapid changes in blood glucose are particularly strong signals for meals. This is David Ludwig. I think this is his first study, one of his first studies. What did he do? He measured calorie intake and hunger based on calorie-controlled glycemic meals, low carb, medium carb, high carb. And what did he find? At 4 and 5 hours, the higher the carb meal, the more the eating. These were protein-controlled. Subjects ate 81% more total energy after consuming 2 meals of instant oatmeal than they did after consuming 2 meals with the same amount of energy in the form of a vegetable omelet and fruit. He means berries here. This is 1999. This is Rajita Sinha from Yale, where I trained in internal medicine residency in 2011. She said, is it insulin or glucose? So she put people on a euglycemic, hypoglycemic clamp. It's a fancy way of saying she measured what happens to people's hunger with blood sugar fluctuations, and she showed that a 20-point drop in blood sugar is what caused the brain to light up and people to say, I want food. A 20-point drop. Right? That's all it took. It wasn't the insulin. They had to allow the blood sugar to come down. It was the glucose and insulin relation that did it. Transient, modest reductions in circulating glucose decrease prefrontal cortical inhibitory control and could promote overeating, particularly in an environment inundated with visual cues of high caloric food. Again, with the calories. This is another work from David Ludwig showing that total blood energy is actually decreased with a high-carb meal. And here's another one. This was a very interesting one. This is very recently as the advent of CGMs came out, showing that hunger relates to the time of day with the lowest blood sugar. Now, this is 2019. I'm going to skip over this. This is another one from David Ludwig showing that low-carb foods compared to high-carb foods preferentially light up the nucleus accumbens, which is the area of our brain associated with pleasure-seeking eating. I'm going to spare you reading all that. Let's fast forward to 2021. A big group, I think out of Israel actually, looked at 1,000 people with 80,000 meals. And what did they find? They find that when people have a high carb, high glycemic index food in a person who's vulnerable, metabolically unwell, their blood sugar will spike up, their body will respond with insulin, and they will dip glycemically. Bonk, we call it. This drives hunger. It drives hunger. It drives increased intake. You eat more in the ensuing 3 to 4 hours. You eat more over the next 24 hours. And in the next 2 weeks, you are much more likely to gain weight. Blood sugar fluctuations. In 1,000 patients across 80,000 meals, postprandial glucose dips are common and lead to increased hunger and energy intake in the real-world conditions. When this study came out and I posted about it, there was a very well-known researcher who called me and said, do you believe this? Somebody that was listed on Dr. Andreas's presentation. Hint, he had horns. I said, of course I believe it. There's so much evidence to support it. And I see it every day in my clinic. And you have 1,000 patients. What more do you need? Well, I don't believe it. That's interesting. What I want you to take away from this talk, okay? Tracking and logging and calculating calories have never been shown to be better than any other modality. In fact, they're worse than just saying low fat. Consider instead educating your patients about hunger, what drives human eating, how does the brain reward food, how to manage emotional eating, how to manage social situations. These are vastly more important. 5 things. Your job is 5 things. Manage your patient's hunger, cravings, feelings of deprivation, social situations, and emotions. And if a patient has failed using the calorie-centric approach, try something else. Okay? Yes, there are medications. There are many beautiful medications you can use for high cholesterol, high triglycerides. Lose weight with Ozempic and semaglutide and tirzepatide. But your clinic can be excellent. Your clinic can achieve greatness. And focusing on metabolic health and lifestyle is truly a paradigm change. Those drugs have netted those companies billions of dollars in valuations. Each of you has the ability to do that and more. Right? We're sitting on a gold mine. We're not some ragtag group of doctors and dietitians and trainers and NPs and PAs. We are literally sitting on miracles, and we will change the world.